very special Star Wars welcome to Kathleen Kennedy.
Almost every day, we are sitting in long, lengthy story meetings, and great stuff is coming out of those discussions.
Now, this is something I'm intrigued about. When you're working at Lucasfilm, are you sitting in George's office where he used to work, or have you got your own office, different one?
George is still in the main house at the ranch.
Is he?
Yes. And we're in the building in the Presidio, and yes, I'm in his office.
I'm so pleased to see you. You are the future.
Well, listen, this is a daunting proposition, and I can't do this without every single one of you out there. I have to say, the minute I came here yesterday, and this is the first time I've been to Celebration, I was just completely overwhelmed at what I was looking at. What you as fans have created, and how exciting it is to see the quality of the work and the commitment to Star Wars. It's the kind of thing we talk about every single day when we sit down and discuss a story and look to see where we're going with the future of Star Wars. It means a great deal to us, and I can see that it means a tremendous amount to you. So that's something that we want to protect.
Wow, thank you. Well, we'll come on to Star Wars a little bit later in the discussion, but you know, looking at the retrospective of your work there, you know, we're reminded of how many amazing projects you've been involved with throughout the years that have been part of us growing up and part of our movie-going experience for so many years.
Growing up.
Absolutely. But where did it all start for you? I mean, you know, was there a moment in your life that you suddenly said, this is what I want to do, I want to be a filmmaker? What was your inspiration?
Well, you know, it's interesting because I actually grew up in a pretty small town, so I didn't grow up in an environment where everybody was working in Hollywood. I don't come from Los Angeles. It's not something that anybody in my family did. So it really, I suppose, it sort of evolved over time. I took some classes in college, just like many film students or aficionados, I'm sure, here in the audience. And one thing after another, I became more and more interested in telling stories through cinema. And I went to see Close Encounters. And that is the movie that really galvanized my interest in wanting to get into the movie business. And then I know that my story sounds almost made up because one of the first people I met soon after I graduated was Steven Spielberg. And I started working on the movie 1941 as a production assistant and working specifically with John Milius, who was the executive producer at the time. And after that association, Steven asked me to come work for him. And the first script he put in front of me was Raiders of the Lost Ark. So that pretty much catapulted me into the movie business, and it's just been an incredible ride ever since.
Now that was the first time you met George. You were working as associate to Steven, but of course you were there between these two giants of the industry. What was that like for you on one of your first films?
It was pretty amazing. I mean, Steven had already done Jaws and Close Encounters. George was just coming off of Star Wars. And I was just getting started in the movie business. So it was quite overwhelming to be in the midst of those two. And then it's where I met Frank, who I eventually married. So I was surrounded by some pretty powerful men, but I did find my own way, you know? Somewhere in the midst of it. And then all of a sudden, halfway through the lunch, he said, look, I don't know how much you know about my conversations about retiring, but I am thinking about slowing things down a bit and stepping aside, and I'd really like you to come in and run the company. And at first, I didn't really realize what he had said. But once I did realize what he said, I answered pretty quickly. Not because it seems obvious, because obviously I think there's a lot of people out there that would love to be a part of this company, and I strongly encourage you to do that. But it's something that I realized was going to afford me an opportunity to take all the skills and all the things that I'd done all these years throughout the movie business and be a part of something so much bigger. And now that Star Wars has been bought by the Walt Disney Company, it's become even bigger because it's the biggest media company in the world. And the opportunities that affords us for Star Wars and the movies that we get to make inside the universe that George has created, that's just, I mean, I can't think of anything more fun and more exciting than doing that.
And at that meeting as well, to get a little bit more detail, did George ever talk about you having to wear a plaid shirt and growing a beard at any point? Was that something that is a requirement of the job?
Well, in the old days, it used to be that you had to carry a cigar around if you were a producer.
Absolutely.
I haven't done any, no, I do have a plaid shirt. I have one.
Brilliant. Now, tell me around, talk about the process of selecting J.J. Abrams as a director. What were you looking for, and what do you think you've got from him?
Well, you know, an interesting thing is I've actually known J.J. Abrams since he was about 15. I'll tell you a funny story. I was working as Steven Spielberg's assistant, and a man called saying that he had found a box of Super 8 films, all dusty, in the basement of his house. And I thought, okay. I didn't know if he was necessarily looking for money because he thought he found these films or what, so I was being cautious and I said, well, could you bring the box by the office and we'll take a look and see what it is. I hang up the phone, I ask Steven if he knows anything about it. He said, yeah, I lost all the films that I made as a kid, and maybe that's them. So this man showed up with the box, and sure enough, inside were all these films that Steven had made when he was 11, 12, 13 years old. And this man was unbelievably nice, wasn't looking for anything, and Steven recovered these films. So simultaneous to this, I'm reading an article in Variety, and these two kids in high school had won this video award. And I said to Steven, you know what would be great? Why don't we hire these guys to come in and clean your films and transfer them to tape? And he said, that's a great idea. And those two kids were J.J. Abrams and Matt Reeves. So the great thing is, Steven and I have kind of been at the forefront of watching J.J.'s amazing career in television and film. And when this opportunity came about, George and I started talking about what we thought was actually a very short list of people that we were considering to come in and launch episode 7. And JJ was at the top of that list. JJ embodies, I think, many of the qualities and a very similar personality to both George and Steven. He has a sense of aspiration in what he does. His films tend to be hopeful. They're fun and exciting. He understands how to use effects. He's a great storyteller. He's a writer as well as a director. So I think he's going to do an amazing job. And the group of writers that we've assembled with Michael Arndt and Larry Kasdan and Simon Kinberg, we couldn't have a better team in service of this movie. It's really exciting.
And then in your discussions, I mean, have you talked about how you're going to balance sort of honouring the existing films, and then at the same time, obviously, you've got to create something fresh and new as well?
There's no question. I mean, this is, I keep saying this, it is a daunting exercise. You guys probably know many more details than I do about everything inside the universe of Star Wars. So there's been an amazing education process that's had to go on with this. And conversations we had early on with George where George, it was fantastic to just immerse ourselves with him day after day after day as he downloaded many of the ideas that he initially had about how he came up with all of this. Just understanding that and getting a really strong foundation for just how complex this world is that he's created, and recognizing that these are important films to everybody here and everybody around the world who generationally now has grown up in this universe of Star Wars. We have to be careful with that. This is a huge responsibility associated with that, and we're all taking that really seriously.
That's good to hear. Was there anything, one particular thing you can tell us in those conversations that he said, a key thing that he passed on to you that sort of represents how you should take Star Wars forward? Was there anything you can say?
I think the key was that George kept saying over and over again, not only are these stories aspirational, but they're fun. He really wanted to make sure that we were going to maintain a sense of humor inside the storytelling. And I think he's absolutely right. That's what makes these movies really fun and separates them from a lot of others in a similar genre.
And of course, you know, storytelling is hugely important to you as a producer. We see in the films that you've made in the past, and I know it is to George as well, because you know, the heart of Star Wars is the story. It's not about the effects, is it? And that's, I think, why you'll be so important to this project as well.
So that is what I'm really excited about. I think we have an opportunity to create some amazing new characters, and the story and the characters are all we're talking about right now. We know that we have an amazing team inside of ILM that can create fantastic effects. But if we don't have great story and we don't have great characters, then the effects mean nothing.
When you see what's showing in theatres nowadays and things, what do you think's missing? What are the stories that aren't being told outside of Star Wars, obviously?
I mean, I don't want to suggest that all the films out there are missing something, but I do think, you know, making huge popular culture, and I've had the good fortune of being involved in a lot of it, it's really, really hard to do, and it's really hard to get right. And I think if you don't pay attention to the real building or the foundation of these stories and really spend the time that you need on developing characters and finding the stories and finding unique stories, complicated stories, I think after a while the audience gets tired because they feel like they're seeing the same thing over and over again.
Absolutely. So Kathy, at the beginning of the interview today, I've asked people to tweet some questions to you. So I'd like to turn to the Twitter hashtag now and see if we have a question that we can put to Kathleen. What have we got? Okay, this is from Aniki Arneston. What is the most important thing you have learned about Star Wars fans since you announced Episode 7?
They control everything.
Do we have anything else from the Twitter feed? Thank you. Will you be employing Warwick Davis? That's a good question. That's a good question.
Actually, it's all we talk about.
Is that what you talk about in your meetings?
It is. Yeah, constantly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Get up, breakfast, George's office.
Well, it's not only the design you showed me, there's many more.
There's many more?
Oh, many more.
Wow. Very good. Thank you very much indeed. You heard it here. Witnesses right here. That's good. Right. I'm slightly embarrassed now. It got really warm in here all of a sudden. Guys, you've got to promise me that we won't go further than this room with it, okay? We'll keep it between ourselves, okay? Just tell us one little piece of information that we can go away with delighted.
Well, I can tell you, I had breakfast with somebody very important to the Star Wars family on Friday.
Oh.
And he has committed to being involved in the next 3 films. And that is Mr. John Williams. when I told Johnny that we were going to be at Celebration, he said, well, let me say something. So here's Johnny.
The galaxy far, far away, I actually feel like I'm still in it, that I've never really left it, you know. Having worked on all of the 6 films, I'm just happy to be continuing to be part of the whole fun of doing it. Of course, I haven't seen the script, but the story is still unknown to me, the new story. But I can't imagine that there will not be some references to the existing stories that we know that would necessitate and make appropriate the use of some of the earlier themes, which actually for me has been part of the fun of doing film after film, because in each case I've been able to use the earlier material and develop new material that would coexist with it and hopefully feel like a part of the fabric of the film. Since I don't know the story, I have to tell you and confess to you that I would always prefer not to read scripts and even not to hear stories and look at cue cards and so on, and wait for the moment of discovery with the audience of the film itself. So I'm as surprised as they are and I know where to put the surprise button, you know, having not been prepared by a script. And of course, during the first film, and I think our colleagues working on the film had no idea that there was going to be a second film, let alone a third or fourth. So I'm waiting anxiously, like the audience around the world, to find out what the surprises are and discover what my continuing role is going to be. I had dinner with Kathleen Kennedy and J.J. Abrams, and they are 2 people that I think are perfectly chosen to continue George Lucas's great odyssey. They're both young, they're both extremely gifted, have tremendous energy, and even in the case of J.J., who for me is very young, is also very experienced. He's had some great success with large-scale projects, which are very difficult logistically and mechanically to photographically, all of it. And even though he's a very young man, he brings with him a lot of expertise, a lot of great background. So I think the combination of their youth and their experience and their energy and gifts, I mean, I couldn't, if I'd been asked, I wasn't, but if I'd been asked by the various boards of directors, find me 2 people to take this project on to the next step, I would certainly have voted for them. We couldn't find better candidates for this opportunity.
Kathy, just to finish now, when you go back to your office next week and you're in your meetings, what will you take away with you from Celebration back to Lucasfilm?
Just exactly what role you're going to play.
Oh, okay.
No, I told JJ that, and I'm looking forward to this today, to get my iPhone out and start taking some little movies of what you guys are doing and sending it to him, because he emailed me this morning to find out how it was going, and he's never been to Celebration. So that's what I'm excited about doing today, to come back and actually take some little movies of especially those, all the droids you guys were making. I just couldn't believe how great those were. And Jabba, and I gotta go back to everything I saw yesterday, let's put it that way, and see more. So this has been great fun. I am really looking forward to this. Very exciting to be here. Thank you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together, Kathleen Kennedy.